Heard the minister today say it's not tied to income. Why are they continually asking on 3 separate occasions for the exact same information? Mr. Speaker, there is mass confusion out there for the residents of long-term care and their families in regards to how this increase in the rates is applying to them. So I ask the minister, if it is not tied to income, why is your department continually requesting families to provide the same information regarding income over and over again?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I guess if, as I said, there is a sliding scale. There are some people whose incomes are so low that the fees don't apply, and perhaps the department is attempting to assess whether or not, and I don't know, I can't speak specifically to the case the member brings forward. I'd be happy to look into it, though. But perhaps the request for the information is to determine whether or not the individual falls into that very bottom category.
The Honourable Member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, she is not in the bottom category. She is paying her daily rate. The family can't understand how, when her income went up by just over $6 a day, the Department of Health is now asking for them to pay over $24 a day. So it's not because she's at the low end, it's because they cannot understand how that increase has taken place. Now, Mr. Speaker, when they were in opposition, I remember the current Minister of Finance continually harping on the previous government about making user fee increases or any other increases outside of this legislative chamber. When this government decided to increase the daily rate of residents in long-term care, they did so in the cabinet room, outside of this legislature, and outside of the place where representatives from all parts of this province could debate that and fully understand the merits of that increase. Yet that wasn't done. So my final question to the Premier is that when he campaigned on a plan for a better deal for Nova Scotia families, did you specifically intend to exclude residents of long-term care and their families?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the members of this caucus and myself in particular are very proud of the work that we have done in respect to long-term care. We think of it as ending a practice that went on for many years that impoverished many seniors. Currently, with respect to the costs, whether they happen to be non-profits or private institutions, the way that the per diem is set is based on the input costs of running that particular institution, the non-medical input costs. So because these are private institutions, so they are to offset the private costs associated with those facilities. And Mr. Speaker, so they're not tied, as my colleague indicated, they're not tied to income in the fashion in which the member suggests. They are tied to the input costs associated with the facilities.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question to you is to the Minister responsible for the Resource Recovery Board. Earlier this session, the member for Victoria the Lakes asked, and I quote, "Which rural town will be the next to feel the wrath of this government's policies?" End of quote. Now we have the answer. It's Lincolnville, Guysborough County. Despite a bid that would save taxpayers of this province $650,000 to recycle tires, the District of Guysborough lost the contract to a Halifax company. Can the minister explain why, despite having excellent facilities and a lower bid, why did the Guysborough lose out on this contract?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Resource Recovery Board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And if the member opposite was paying attention, I think he would review the questions of the previous week. That question was asked, and I can tell the member opposite that that particular situation is before the courts, and it's inappropriate for me to comment at this time. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I want you to understand something. I can hear that, Minister, and I hear what's going on in this House. Now, if he doesn't like being asked a question, maybe he should resign as being Minister. But our prerogative here is to ask questions. He didn't answer it last week, and he's not answering it today. Now, my question to that Minister, and maybe he wouldn't mind listening, my first supplementary to you, sir, the District of Guysborough, sir, like the members of this House, is unable to get answers as to why they lost this bid and are forced to take the Resource Recovery Fund Board to court. They have to go to court to get an explanation. That's the way this government operates. If you can't get anything, take us to court. Well, have you? I want to know, Mr. Speaker. And yeah, well, that's why we pay his fees. Have you been briefed by your staff, Mr. Minister? Have you been briefed by your staff as to what this court case will cost the taxpayers of Nova Scotia?
The honourable minister responsible for the Resource Recovery Board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and the member opposite, I believe, has been around this House long enough to know that these particular situations, when they're before the courts, that is inappropriate to comment, and that's exactly the strategy that I'm doing. I answered the question, and I encourage the member to ask me more questions. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, to the Minister responsible for resource recovery. There's a recycled tires all on that side of the House right now. Mr. Minister, Mr. Speaker, the question was not about what's going on in the case. The question wasn't about what was going on in the case, Mr. Speaker. The question is, how much money is this government going to spend for this case? It has nothing to do with what's going on with the case. The question is, how much taxpayers' money is this minister willing to spend to prove how inappropriate the contract award was? Wouldn't it be easier, Mr. Speaker, and I wonder why, and I want to know from the minister, why he won't just give the 6 other tire recycling bids to the municipality of Guysborough so they can get the answers they want and don't have to go to court, don't have to cause the province of Nova Scotia money, and get on with doing the right thing as they always say they were going to do.
The honourable minister responsible for the Resource Recovery Board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sitting by the pun capital, or the minister, and this is where the rubber hits the road, right here. We make the right decisions. We have addressed this question before, and when a question like this, Mr. Speaker, is before the courts, it's inappropriate to comment, and that's exactly what I chose to do. Thank you very much.
Order. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the minister responsible for the Workers' Compensation Board. The Workers' Compensation Board has nearly $700 million worth of unfunded liability. Yet senior staff have been handed massive raises, according to allnovascotia.com. There have been salary increases between 6.9% to 17.1% for various staff. And the top salary is nearly $250,000 per year. My question to the minister responsible is, do you think these salary increases are reasonable or responsible in this time of financial restraint?
The honourable minister responsible for the Workers' Compensation Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm assuming that information came from the 2009 annual report. It's public information. The Workers' Compensation Board are an independent body, and they decide. The board decides on the salaries of their senior staff. Thank you.
The honourable member for Preston on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the average workers' compensation worker's salary is over $69,000 per year. Meanwhile, there were 7,206 serious injuries last year, which resulted in time lost from work. My question to the minister again is, shouldn't there be investing in injury prevention and injured workers rather than salary increases for staff?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Workers' Compensation Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Workers' Compensation Board have a very heavy responsibility, and certainly workplace safety is a key priority of this government. And we want to keep the assessments reasonable for the employers. At the same time, we've actually given the Workers' Compensation Board increased responsibility for workplace safety, not only among their own members, but certainly among the entire workforce across the province. So it's a responsible position, and we agree that we want to be fair and equitable to those who have suffer injuries in the workplace, and we're working very hard to decrease. One injury or one death is one too many. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Preston on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the board chair, Elaine Simpson, said, with respect to the salary increases, it's an issue that is raised, if raised by the people, it might come to the board table. My question to the minister is really simple. Do you intend to raise this issue with the board, the Workers' Compensation Board, again at this time of financial restraint?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister responsible for the Workers' Compensation Board.
Certainly, as the member has indicated, the new chair has recently been selected and is in place, and certainly I am the Deputy Minister of Labour and Workforce Development and the CEO of Workers' Compensation Board will have regular meetings, and there will be a number of issues being discussed. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Finance. The Minister has stated that the previous government left him a mess. What specifically did you not like about Tory spending while you were in opposition?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, there's not enough time left in question period for me to answer that question. Let me start. How many ways did they leave us a mess, Mr. Speaker? Let me count the ways. Let me start, for example, Mr. Speaker, with the cost overruns at the Colchester Regional Hospital. That hospital, when it was first promised, was supposed to come in at just slightly over $100 million. The day we walked into office, we were told that we had no choice. The new cost was a minimum of $180 million, Mr. Speaker, through gross mismanagement on the part of that crowd over there, Mr. Speaker, and that's just the first of many examples that I could give.
The Honourable Member for Inverness on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the Minister for shedding some light on his displeasure with past budgets. What's funny about this is, though, that the Minister actually voted for these budgets from 2004 to 2007. So what are the main, my question to the Minister, what are the main changes to spending in your 2010 budget?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
The problem, Mr. Speaker, is precisely this, is those cost overruns, which that crowd over there knew about, Mr. Speaker, were not included in the budget. Let me give the member another example, Mr. Speaker. H1N1. Everybody knew that H1N1 was coming last year, Mr. Speaker. How much did that crowd include in their budget for H1N1, Mr. Speaker? They included zero. So that when we came in, we had to include the things that they should have put in, Mr. Speaker. That's just one more example of the mess that they left behind.
The Honourable Member for Inverness on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I find this interesting. You know, the Minister has raised a couple of examples today, but originally he was saying there was a structural problem. Now, he's not raised any structural problems today. So little really has changed with this 2010 budget. And if if the minister feels that there has been a lot of change in the way this government is expending money, perhaps he can identify what the cuts were that he did make. And if he plans to reduce expenditure in the future, perhaps he can identify what areas he plans to cut in the future.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, let me then talk about the structural deficit, since I haven't talked about that so far. The essence of the structural deficit, Mr. Speaker, is that when that crowd was in government, they spent at an average rate of increase of 5% per year, which was fine as long as the revenue was going up at the same rate. The problem, Mr. Speaker, was that when the revenue went flat, they were completely out of ideas, and all they had left was the only three things that they knew how to do: spend, spend, spend.
Order. Order. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question today is to the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, today the Department of Community Services appeared before the Public Accounts Committee to discuss regional housing authorities. A simple question was asked at that meeting. Our party would like to know what the wait lists are for each regional housing authority. And the answer we got was no answer. They would not give a firm answer. They went on to say that the wait lists can vary. We were simply asking a very proper question, I guess. Tell us how many people require affordable housing in this province. That's the question we were asking this morning. I'm asking it again today. Will the minister table a waiting list for each regional housing authority today?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. One of the aspects that people have to understand with the waiting list for housing is that the numbers that we will provide, and we will provide those numbers, are not exact numbers in the terms of what the wait is about. Often there's people that want to go in particular housing units, and therefore they are on the waiting list, and something may come up and they'll refuse to go into that particular unit. So you have to keep in mind there's a lot of factors in those numbers, but there's absolutely no issue in my department to provide those numbers to the honourable member. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South, and your first supplementary.
I guess, Mr. Speaker, that begs the question, why wasn't that done this morning at the committee meeting? It would have saved me the trouble of asking the minister the question this afternoon. And I guess we have two sets of waiting lists here. One is one kind of waiting list, and another is another kind of waiting list, if I listen to what the minister had to say. Well, I can tell the minister what the waiting list is in the Cape Breton Housing Authority is 360 on the waiting list, of which 80 units are empty over and above that, and not fit for habitation at the present time. So if she doesn't have the numbers yet, I can give her those numbers, and I have the numbers here for the other housing authorities as well. My question is, I guess, why didn't the people that were there before the committee this morning give the Public Accounts Committee those numbers? What are they trying to hide? My question to the minister is, do you consider these vacancy rates acceptable?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, I understand that our department offered to table those, and we'll bring that information forth, so I don't know why we were even asked that question. And secondly, of course I don't think they're acceptable numbers. It's just too bad that the former government didn't realize and put their efforts into those issues and funding and the faces of the issues that we have been facing. So no, they're not, but we're working on a strategy to go forward to see what we can do to help in terms of housing in this province. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Cape Breton South, and your final supplementary.
Speaker, at least the minister is not blaming this party, blaming the party to my left here. I was not philosophically to my left, but structurally to my left. 30% vacancy rate is not appropriate in this province. And a 360 people waiting list for apartments in the Cape Breton Housing Authority is also not appropriate, Mr. Speaker.
And that leads, when you have a vacancy rate like that, Mr. Speaker, it leads to the private sector doing what I would call predatory pricing. In other words, the people who can't get public housing units are forced into substandard housing. And I know this to be a fact in my area, and are paying rents way above what they should be paying, Mr. Speaker, that they would be paying if they were in public housing. The priority should be to fix those units that are vacant up and get people who need adequate housing into those units at rates they can afford. My question to the Minister is, what is your department going to do to ensure the needs of the many people on low income in my area and throughout Nova Scotia get proper housing in public housing units and not be subjected to slum landlords?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We're working towards that. We know that it is an issue, and we're doing many things surrounding that. The stimulus funding has put in $128 million towards the housing in the province of Nova Scotia. We are working at a housing strategy, along with we're also doing something that I think is fairly unique in government, is that we're working with all the different partners out there. We're not making the decisions on our own. We have a new group that is working from all different sectors, from the building associations of Nova Scotia, the local contractors. So we know we need to have a strategy, and that's what is important, is to have a strategy and to work with all those people that are involved in the sector, and that's exactly what we're doing. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Argyle.
Speaker, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, during the last year's election campaign, the people of Nova Scotia were assured that, if elected, the NDP would offer, and I quote from its election platform, a plan that includes a range of steps to help seniors stay longer and healthier. Well, we know what that commitment was worth after learning that the Lansdowne Outdoor Recreation Development Association Park, designed to provide a range of recreation activities accessible to seniors and those with physical disabilities, had been denied a $55,000 grant. What that means is that the park, the only one of its kind in Nova Scotia, will not open after 26 years in operation. I'd like to ask how this is helping seniors stay healthier and longer, and why this government would attempt to cut costs at the expense of the 16,000 people who rely on this park annually as a means of staying active. Hear,
hear. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Health Promotion and Protection has never provided operating funding to this park, or indeed to any other park, Mr. Speaker. And we don't provide operating funding to recreational facilities. What we do is assist with capital costs, Mr. Speaker. And I understand that this operator has been in contact with the department, and the department is looking at what their capital needs might be, Mr. Speaker, and we understand it is an important facility in our province, and we're not really sure at this stage what role we will be able to play with respect to its ongoing operation.
The Honourable Member for Argyle on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. For many of our seniors and people with physical disabilities, the opportunities to get out and enjoy our beautiful Nova Scotia summers is extremely limited. The park allows them to do just that. It draws people from across the province, and those residing in care and various assisted living facilities are there by the busload. LORDA has tremendous value to thousands of Nova Scotian seniors. Therefore, I would like to ask the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection to explain how maybe they could re-look at their role to find maybe some capital grant to help out this organization for $55,000 this year.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I understand that this particular operator has also been in contact with the Department of Seniors as well as the Department of Economic and Regional and Rural Development. And Mr. Speaker, as I said, my department is looking at what their capital needs are. We haven't, I think, at this stage arrived at any conclusion, but Mr. Speaker, we will look very carefully at what is required, because we do recognize that this is a unique facility that provides you know, a service to people with disabilities as well as seniors in the province.
The honourable member for Argyll on your final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for her answer. We know that many of our provincial and community parks do offer some wheelchair accessibility, but LORDA also provides activities, things that people with physical limitations could not typically enjoy, such as fishing, bocce ball, barbecues, and the like. With such a worthwhile investment, I'm asking, you know, can the minister commit to working with the other ministers, like the Minister of Seniors, like the Minister of Community Services, like the Minister of Economic Development, to find a way to reinstate this funding to this, this very important organization in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will just reiterate what I've said, that LORDA has been in contact with Health Promotion and Protection. We don't fund operating the operating budgets for recreational facilities, but we do provide assistance with respect to capital improvements. The organization has been in contact with the Department of Seniors and as well as my colleague's Department, Economic and Rural Development, and certainly we will look very carefully at what it is that they require and what programs we have that might accommodate their requirements, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Energy. Mr. Speaker, the Minister and I met with concerned citizens from Digby about wind turbines and how close they were to their homes. Many people are worried about the turbines, that they may cause illness to them in time to come. So my question to the Minister, if this happens, who will be responsible if people in this area become ill because the wind turbines are too close to their homes?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question, and it was a pleasure to meet with the residents of that community, and I know that the member opposite has a particular personal concern because of where his home is located. And as a follow-up to that meeting, I want the member to know that I have met with staff and asked for more detailed information, specifically of that case alone, because you know, the sincerity of those folks and the information that they brought forward at that time, I felt obliged when the meeting was over that when the time came for a question in this House or a further opportunity we can talk about it privately, it is a concern. I want the member opposite to know that. It is something that I'm going to continue to collect information on, not just on this particular case, member, but on the entire issue. But I do thank you for bringing it to your attention, and it was a pleasure to meet your residents.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, my question is, if this government truly believes that wind turbines close to homes will not affect the people, will this government commit to being responsible for any damage done to the people or their property?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite is well aware of the fact that further to the discussions that we had that day and the specifics that were brought about, I think those people knew that they had my attention during that short meeting. I look forward to meeting them in the future. It remains a concern for this government as it does for you.
Please. The time for oral question period has expired. I'll recognize the Honourable House Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we'll call opposition business for the day. First bill we're going to call is Bill number 28, an act to amend Chapter 6 of the Acts of 2002, the Fire Safety Act.
Bill number 28. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to stand in my place today to speak to Bill number 28, an act to amend Chapter 6 of the Acts of 2002 of the Fire Safety Act. Mr. Speaker, this is a bill that provides long overdue recognition for firefighters. It's a bill that would provide long service medals for individuals in fire departments after 15 and 25 years of service. You know, Mr. Speaker, regardless of the day, place, or time, these selfless individuals give of themselves to ensure the safety and the well-being of communities all over this province. These brave men and women do not seek praise. They simply go about their jobs in doing so, make an immeasurable difference to our province. And Mr. Speaker, in almost 40 years of being in the fire service and 25 of those as fire chief, I've witnessed that dedication firsthand. Mr. Speaker, these individuals, through their bravery and professionalism, have protected and saved countless lives and millions of dollars of property. Very few jobs induce the stress and dangers as emergency service providers. Mr. Speaker, these individuals truly risk their lives for others, and for that, they are worthy of our recognition. And Mr. Speaker, this recognition, while very important, is only one step. We know that to properly honor the service of these individuals, we as a province need to provide them with all the necessary tools to do their job, and to do their job properly. If they're willing to put themselves in positions few others are willing or able to do, Mr. Speaker, the least we can do is provide them the necessary equipment. When I mention that, Mr. Speaker, I have to say that's why I was so very disappointed with the NDP's decision to cut the Emergency Services Providers Fund. Mr. Speaker, this fund was set up by the previous government and gave over $8 million to serving fire departments, not only in restricted areas, but indeed fire departments throughout this province. That over $8 million has been reduced to just over $900,000 today. This means, Mr. Speaker, that many providers will be unable to have the equipment necessary to meet the basic needs of their tasks. It's a shame, and we hope the NDP government changes their stance on the issue and provides more money for the Emergency Services Providers Fund. Mr. Speaker, while universally humble, we feel these individuals are worthy of the recognition they will receive in these long service medals. They're to be worn proudly, for many of these individuals are simply irreplaceable. And Mr. Speaker, to wear them proudly, they will. All you have to do is look at the dedication to their fire department, to the fire service, and to their community. And you know that they're proud, or they wouldn't be putting their lives on the line each and every time they answer a fire call. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I must say that this is long overdue. We did look at fire departments that were getting 25 years. You had to work for 25 years or be in the fire service for 25 years. Many fire department members, regrettably, were never there the 25 years to receive the medal that they so rightly deserved. Now, with a 15-year span, they can be recognized, and recognized they should be. Yes, and as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, thanks for that, honourable member from Cumberland South. You know, I mentioned earlier that I've been in the fire department for close to 40 years. That's why my hair is the colour it is. And the fire chief in Big Benor fire chief in Big Bador informed me just recently that at the fire department installation that will be taking place this coming Saturday, I will be receiving my 25-year pin. I guess, Mr. Speaker, I was one of the fortunate ones to pass that 25-year mark and be able to receive it. I'm not going to comment on that as far as age goes, but I think if I joined the fire department when I was 16 years old, and if you want to add 40 years to that, you might find my age. So I might get 2 medals, I guess, possibly. If the 15-year comes in, I'll be able to get my 25, my 15 at once. So that will recognize the.
How's fire service changed in all those years?
Mr. Speaker, when you look at the honouring of these members, and I did mention that they have put their lives on the line each and every time they answer a call. When I joined the fire department way back 40 years ago, the methods of fighting a fire are much different than they are today. We have our furniture with so many chemicals and gases that are emitted. We have homes that are built differently. They risk their lives each and every time. And I guess that's why the importance of the Emergency Services Providers Fund, Mr. Speaker. It provides fire departments with such things as the right breathing apparatus when they do come on a fire scene. But it goes beyond that. The fire service witnesses motor vehicle accidents. And you have to wear your breathing apparatus at a motor vehicle accident because you do not know what gases are being emitted at a motor vehicle accident in the case of a fire. These men and women get out of their beds to answer a fire call, leaving behind a family who does not know whether or not they will be returning. So honoring them by presenting them with this well-deserved long service medal in 15 years is indeed very deserving. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned the amount of time and the effort that firefighters put into firefighting. But you can't be a firefighter unless you're trained. And a lot of time is being spent on training, more time away from their family. The training is going on probably more than the calls that are being answered. In order to provide some of the necessary equipment, they don't get enough from their municipalities. They haven't gotten enough from the Emergency Services Providers Fund. So these fire department members, these men and women, no longer have to just get training. They no longer fight fires. They are no longer the first responders in their community, but in order to do that, they have to go get out and raise their own money. And in these times when every organization and every group is trying to go to the same people looking for their the funds to keep their organizations going, that makes it even harder for the firefighters. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a volunteer, but it's a 24-hour job. We have to thank the employers that are out there who let their employees leave their job when they receive a fire call. Hear, hear. So there are so many more beyond the fire service that we should be thanking and we should be recognizing. And I know that I'll never forget an episode that I witnessed during my time in the fire service, and this was back in the days when the alarm system wasn't the best. It was beyond the crank phone, but it was a dial-out system. And I remember being in my bed at 3 o'clock in the morning when the alarm went off, and the message that we got was to respond to a certain address in Big Bador, and immediately, your first reaction, you jump out of bed, you put on your pants, you start out the door. Before I got out the door, Mr. Speaker, there was a message came over the paging system again to respond to this house in Big Bador and that there were children in the house. So automatically, those pants that you put on are not much good to you. because you feel like dropping on the floor anyway, because you don't know what you're facing when you're going there, Mr. Speaker. As luck would have it, the children were out of the house. The home was completely destroyed, but the children, by the grace of God, were out of the house. So these are instances, Mr. Speaker, that firefighters, the men and women, the brave men and women, face each and every time they leave their homes, they leave their families. So Mr. Speaker, there's not a community in this province who could exist without the dedication, the commitment, the professionalism that each and every one of these volunteers demonstrate, Mr. Speaker. And we can finally now recognize them by honoring them with a long service medal after 15 years of service. Mr. Speaker, this recognition, as I say, is only one step. And I urge all members to support this bill, and quite possibly, Mr. Speaker, we can bring it forward for second reading this afternoon. Well, having said that, I'll take my place.
Thank you. The honourable member from Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Cumberland South for bringing this, introducing this piece of legislation, because it gives an opportunity for all members here to hopefully say a few words or recognize the dedicated work that the men and women who are firefighters and first responders around the province, the work they do and how important it is, Mr. Speaker. I want to commend, I know many members here that I've come to know over the last number of years have and still are serving in the volunteer fire departments throughout the province. The member from Victoria Lakes stated over 40 years, so I guess he is truly one of those professional smoke eaters, and you can take whatever you want from that. But I too had spent some time, like the member from Argyle, I believe, as a volunteer firefighter. In the early days. I remember when I turned 19, it was one of the first things I did to try to serve my community, but it was kind of a neat experience. You know, some of my friends were involved in the volunteer service and definitely passed on their excitement of belonging to such an organization, Mr. Speaker. Throughout the province, we have communities in the smallest corners of our province that have men and women who are dedicated to providing this service for their neighbours, for the residents that live around them, Mr. Speaker. And we do need to recognize that. And I definitely understand what those individuals give to their community, Mr. Speaker. And I know our members, our caucus, and this government want to recognize the service of these men and women that give so much of their time to providing an important service to their neighbours, Mr. Speaker, and to the residents of our province. Our caucus, throughout the years, Mr. Speaker, has worked very hard to bring forward ideas, bring forward initiatives to the government when we were in opposition and now as government, to hopefully recognize that work and ensure that firefighters are not forgotten, that they're given the services and the protection that they need, Mr. Speaker, the support of government, the support of municipal, local government also, Mr. Speaker. And I know that our now Premier and our member from Cape Breton Centre were recognized a number of years ago from the local union of the International Firefighters Association here in Halifax, given honorary life membership of their local because of some of the work they did to put pressure on, and I'd like to commend the government at the time to include more cancers that were recognized as ailments that firefighters or former firefighters might come down with, Mr. Speaker, and it was a great decision of the government at the time to continue on that. So I think, shown in the past and will continue to show that we definitely care about the firefighters that we see and have here in our province, Mr. Speaker, and we'll continue to bring forward support for those firefighters throughout our province. And I hope, and I'll tell the member that we'll definitely have a look at this piece of legislation and take it into consideration to see if it's the most appropriate way to recognize the service that firefighters give to each and every one of us here in Nova Scotia, and I truly feel that we will give that debate and have that discussion in the relatively near future, Mr. Speaker. I know throughout the province, the small departments that we have, and the municipalities and the counties and the governments that we have do a great job recognizing the service of firefighters. As the member from Victoria Lakes stated earlier, that he was recognized for his 40-year pin, or he had a 25-year pin. I know that many fire service, like the one I belong to, used to be called the Sackville Fire Department, but now, of course, is the Halifax Regional Municipalities Fire Service after amalgamation, Mr. Speaker, that they take the time to recognize their individual members. And it's a great service. If MLAs have the opportunity to attend some of these recognition and award banquets and dinners that they have, it's important that we show them our support in those arenas, Mr. Speaker. As a government, as a federal government, there are opportunities for fire service, for fire personnel to obtain medals and recognitions. We have a wide range of different service medals, Mr. Speaker, for exemplary service medals, recognizing the people who are working in the high-risk professions throughout our country, and of course in our province, Mr. Speaker. And it's under the Secretary of, I believe, under an Office of the Secretary of the Governor General of Canada, who recognize what the service and what the dedication that firefighters have given to the people of our country, but of course people of our province. So there are opportunities now to be recognized in the service that someone provides the residents of our province, Mr. Speaker, in our country, and I know that will continue to happen. I think there are many opportunities, hopefully, that people within their communities can go towards those fire departments, go towards those municipalities, those county councillors and aldermen, whatever their title is, to ensure that they continue to be recognized and have those opportunities. I know through the mayor's office, they have opportunities also to have those firefighters recognized in different ways, Mr. Speaker. So I'm encouraged, and I know that the member from Cumberland South brought this forward to ensure that the important work that these dedicated men and women provide in Nova Scotia continue to get the support of government and continue to get the support of the members of our assembly here, Mr. Speaker. I have many opportunities over the years to work with firefighters, Mr. Speaker. As I said earlier, I was a volunteer early on. After my exposure within the fire service to the emergency health services, Mr. Speaker, I became a paramedic and worked many years alongside these dedicated individuals. And I tell you, there's no one more dedicated than someone who provides a service, especially in the rural communities, Mr. Speaker, who are volunteers. We have paid firefighters throughout the province, especially in the urban centres here in Halifax. They're all paid members, Mr. Speaker. But I tell you, the most dedicated at times and the ones that have the most ambition at times are those who are volunteers, who do it for free. Sometimes they get an honorarium. Some people get a turkey at Christmas. Some get a small stipend, $200–300, Mr. Speaker. So what we need to do is to continue on and ensure that those individuals receive some of the benefits, some of the tax relief that is possible through government initiatives, Mr. Speaker, that they can continue to provide those services. Because we all know with the decline in population, and especially in our rural communities, that affects how many volunteer members they have in those communities, Mr. Speaker. And a lot of them, and I'm sure the members here could stand up and give you those numbers that have been lowering over the years. They're dedicated small group, and you just couldn't imagine, the hardship that is done when you see or have a fire, Mr. Speaker, and these dedicated people are on call no matter what time of the year it is, Mr. Speaker, what time of the day it is. They're there to respond to those emergencies, Mr. Speaker. Many of my friends, as I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, are full-time firefighters, are volunteer firefighters, and they're dedicated to the work. Much like many other emergency personnel, firefighters, paramedics, police officers, they love their job, Mr. Speaker. And yet, some of them do get, yes, some of them do get paid, but as I said earlier, a majority of them, especially in rural communities, do it for no monetary gain, Mr. Speaker. And that shows the dedication of that individual and the commitment they have for their community and the safety of their community, Mr. Speaker. And I hope that, that firefighters, the men and women who do put on the uniform and provide those services, know how much they're appreciated, not only from the members of this House, Mr. Speaker, and our government, but by the residents themselves here in Nova Scotia, because they provide a tremendous support, Mr. Speaker. So again, Mr. Speaker, it's amazing to see some of the environments that these individuals place themselves in. They're in great harm, Mr. Speaker, with the way construction is today and the material used. As the member from Victoria, the Lakes stated earlier, some of the chemicals and some of the smoke that is given off during these fires are very toxic, Mr. Speaker. So they put their lives at risk every time they respond, Mr. Speaker, and they don't know until they actually arrive on scene what they're going to encounter, Mr. Speaker. And the simplest call when it goes over the radios, Mr. Speaker, or through dispatch, can turn out to be, a serious event. And it's important that our firefighters receive the support, that they have the protection or the gear and the protection gear that they need through their breathing apparatus or the vehicles that they need to extinguish these fires, Mr. Speaker. But the fire service in Nova Scotia has expanded. Many rural communities have offered more than just fire suppression, Mr. Speaker. They offer education to the children in the schools. They do a tremendous job about fire prevention, Mr. Speaker. And as a paramedic, we've learned a lot as a profession from the firefighters on how this prevention and how to, make sure that the public know that they're there to assist them, make sure that they know, how to ensure that their houses and their lives and their activities are safe, Mr. Speaker. But firefighters do more than that now, Mr. Speaker. They do first responders. Many of them respond to medical calls because they're the closest assistance to that accident or to that medical emergency, Mr. Speaker. We have a great ambulance service here in the province, but they're not everywhere. And fire departments are in every little community throughout this province. So you have firefighters who are volunteering, who are showing up to medical calls, providing medical assistance to individuals to try to make a difference, Mr. Speaker, and ensure that those people are safe, they're protected, and they're given the best possible care that they can at that time, Mr. Speaker. So again, I recognize the intention here of this piece of legislation that the member brought forward, and as I said earlier in my statements, that we will review it and we will look at what we could do to enhance the support that this government and my caucus give to firefighters throughout this province, even if they're paid or if they're volunteers, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't matter. They're firefighters, and they do an important role and play an important role in the lives of everybody here in Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member from Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and very pleased to be able to rise in my place today and speak to this proposed bill. And in fact, I know very well that every member in this House would like to get to their feet and speak in some manner about the fire departments in their riding, whether it's a rural riding with 100% volunteers, or whether it's here in Metro or Sydney or another large community where there are paid firefighters. And I'm pleased to hear the member opposite the member of government say that, in fact, they will give consideration to this piece of legislation. It may come back to the House in a little different form, and I know from our party perspective, we have no problem with seeing whatever arrangement they want to make in terms of recognizing long service of firefighters in our province. I can say, and I'm sure many members would also ditto my comment with saying that as MLAs, they probably mark off on their calendars when there's an awards night, a special function to recognize and honor the firefighters in their district. The value to our province of professional firefighters, but I have a special place in my heart for the volunteer firefighter and what they contribute to the safety of our province. Now, and especially, with no remuneration, or again, as members have pointed out, there may be some small honorarium. There may be some little recognition that comes about at certain points in their career. But if we were to place a dollar value on the volunteer firefighter and what they contribute to our province, we know it's a staggering figure in millions and millions of dollars. So to take a little time along the way at years 15 and 25 to give recognition is a very good thing. I guess there's probably a couple of reasons, even at 15. Some members may just stay in that length of time. I know I can refer to my own time in the Kingston Fire Department as having a duration of 15 years. Also, some members join late in life. It's something they want to do and contribute and give back to their community, and so age may catch up with them, and they may only get 15 years in. But it is very, very recognized and regarded, and also there are federal awards, and some counties have started to recognize. This year, Kings County will recognize current and former firefighters that have 15 years of service. So I think it's a good piece of legislation for the province to take a look at. One of the things that we sometimes perhaps don't often appreciate, and I talked to one of the members today who was just recently at an awards night and or their annual general meeting, and they were fascinated by the array of calls, the kind of calls that they have during the course of a year. It is not just a fire. It is not just a house fire or a grass fire that they would respond to. It's a whole wide range. And in fact, in many areas, as the member from Sackville pointed out, they have to be first responders. There's no question that we have a tremendous emergency response service in Nova Scotia, but due to geography, due to other calls, they have to do coverage. And sometimes they're the very first ones at a serious accident. And many of these firefighters are very, very well trained, well beyond first aid, And in fact, they're able to deliver emergency care when they arrive on the scene. The number of different spills of chemicals and looking after those incidents that again happen in our communities and are all too common. So that's one of the reasons that firefighters take a very special place in our communities, and that is the diversity of response, the diversity of reactions that they're able to have. And there really is, I guess, very little difference in our firefighters as far as being professional, whether they're volunteer or paid. The level of training that is now required to be a firefighter has risen over the years. Level 1 is no longer enough, and in fact, fire service is trying to have mobile training units to get out to the departments because it is costly for the volunteer to come to the fire school in Waverley and also get time off work, all these considerations. So I think over the course, of a lifetime, or even a number of years, like 15 or 25, there is a time to acknowledge the commitment and dedication that our firefighters have. One of the other aspects that take members beyond their community to assist is mutual aid. Yeah, mutual aid is a very, very big aspect in many of our rural areas. There are small departments. They don't have all the equipment, enough personnel to respond to a major fire or a major accident or incident in their communities. So the training together sometimes, again, requires additional time. And a comment that I often hear in the Annapolis Valley from Windsor to Annapolis is that the mutual aid system in the valley has been so fine-tuned that, in fact, it is one of the best in North America. And that doesn't come about by accident. That comes about by lots of training, lots of dedication, and lots of commitment to support each other in this cause. One of the aspects, of course, of firefighting and responding to emergency incidents is the risk of injury. And in fact, recently, we were looking at the fact that a firefighter in our area was off work, now going into the 7th week, still no insurance coming his way. And so when I asked the insurance company about this, they said, you know, it does take a while. And I said, why would it take a while? There can't be very many injuries. And I was amazed at the response that he said there are far, far too many injuries in our volunteer and professional fire departments, and basically there's just 1 or 2 companies that seem to take on that insurance risk, and so it does take a while. So fire departments are in fact out of concern for their members, are putting aside a pool of dollars that they can have available to provide income when, in fact, they are off the job. So it's a very, very wide-ranging requirement that firefighters are exposed to, and I know that many departments have to put in long hours with fundraising in addition to training and responding. And that's another aspect, again, that a professional firefighter doesn't have to deal with. You know, they have the available monies to run their departments. Equipment is enormously expensive. Most of it is built in the United States and does come into our country from those areas, and they are extremely costly. So taking some time to recognize those people who risk injury, and when I say injury, that's immediate. One of the aspects that we all know about firefighting, which has come to light in more recent times, is again the accumulative effects of being exposed to toxins when firefighters are on the scene. There are now a couple of known cancers, in fact, where firefighters can receive compensation for. And so that's, again, one of the risks that is there. I know that many communities do all they can to show their appreciation to firefighters, and because I know there's a great sense of comfort and relief when we can, go to bed at night knowing that fire departments are 24/7 and that they will respond to an emergency, whether it's your home, a neighbor, or somebody in the community. So, so I'm very, very much, in support of providing recognition along the way to our firefighters. And that's one of the words now that we always have to use is firefighters, firepersons, because more and more women have joined our departments as recruitment has become problematic in our rural communities. So I think if that could be a little bit of an incentive and a goal, stay in your department for 15 years or 25 years and have provincial recognition for that time of service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak to this bill.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Argyll.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to stand and speak to Bill 28, an act to incorporate basically 15-year and 25-year awards to firefighters in our province. Mr. Speaker, I can say that I joined the fire service back in 1993. And therefore put in somewhere like 17 years to the service. So I'm young compared to my colleague, the member for Victoria. But Mr. Speaker, the 17-year-olds, there's times when I look back at it thinking that that was an awful long time ago, and times were different at that time. Equipment was different. The way we did things was different. And to look at the maturity today of our fire service is absolutely phenomenal. Mr. Speaker, at the time I joined the West Palm Fire Department, I was, of course, just freshly out of university, out of college, and was looking for a volunteer thing to do. I'd always wanted to be a firefighter. Mr. Speaker, I had a number of cousins in the area who were firefighters, and therefore I joined at that time. Mr. Speaker, a little bit of training, and I can say it probably wasn't a whole lot, how to use your BA, how to direct traffic, how to turn the pumps on, those kinds of things. But Mr. Speaker, you really learned how to be a firefighter out in the field at that time. You know, depended on whether you were at a fire in Argyll. I remember one of my first fires, Mr. Speaker, was an older house in Argyll where pretty much, you know, the house was pretty much run down, and we had to of course vent the roof. We had to do a whole bunch of different things like that. And being the young 22-year-old, I think at that time, how old was I? Geez, that seems like an awful long time ago. It was an awful long time ago, Mr. Speaker, and climbing up on the roof and cutting holes in the roof and doing all those things, you know, really puts in perspective of the work that firefighters do. Mr. Speaker, the previous member talked about the commitment of firefighters, of when that phone call comes, when that page happens, whatever the method of call happens, that they automatically put on their pants and get out to the fire department or to the fire, and regardless of what it may be. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, it's not just the physical toll that it plays, or the possible physical toll that it plays on individuals, but there's also a mental side that we don't talk about very often. One that when we call to it, I know the member for Victoria talked about it a little bit, when you're getting called and you know that there are possibility of people trapped within a fire, or drowning victims, or whatever you may be called for. It's very, very difficult and hard on these volunteer individuals. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'll talk to the first call that I remember that I went to, again, 1993, brand new, and actually was sitting there getting the call. And the first call I went to was two 5-year-olds who had fallen through the ice. And I can tell you, to this day, I still remember that day like it just happened yesterday. And my heart still today. And I can tell you, without the help that we received from the victim services and from the organization, I probably would have quit that very day. But we have a real close-knit organization, a real close-knit group, and we all saw ourselves through that first. And I can say my career as a volunteer fireman has spanned all those years. Now, today, I got to say, I don't spend an awful lot of time with the fire department, even though my chief continues to assure me that I'm more than welcome at all the fires. I'm more than welcome to come operate equipment as long as I remember how. And Mr. Speaker, but I question that sometimes because my gear is getting kind of old, and I think it's actually out of date. So I don't know what my chief's trying to tell me. I don't know what my chief's trying to tell me. So, Mr. Speaker, I will continue to attend pages as I can in my area, because it's more than just showing up to the meetings or showing up to the turkey suppers, showing up to the the fundraisers, but it's actually those opportunities where you do get to help individuals. Now, Mr. Speaker, in my riding or my constituency, I represent, I think it's 7 fire departments. Like I said, I joined West Pubnico at that time, but you know, you move on, you get married, and you know, you basically have your first argument with your wife on where you're going to reside, and like many of the other arguments, she won that one, and I moved off to Illbrook in district, and I know I'll continue to lose arguments in that way, but Mr. Speaker, I was happily and taken in by that fire department where I have been ever since that time. I think it was 1997 that I went there. But Mr. Speaker, the neat part about the fire service that it's not just your home fire department. Because of the way the system is set up, because of mutual aid, you tend to know many of the other firefighters in the area. So you get to work with the folks in East Pubnico, the people in Amiros Hill, the fire department in Quinnet. As a matter of fact, we go to all the calls in Quinnet because they're an underserviced fire department and need the extra help. So we always go to their fires. Wedgeport and Plymouth Fire Department, the Islands and District, which I've talked about due to a bridge issue in this House. I've talked about that one many times. A wonderful organization. And Mr. Speaker, there's the Vaughan Lake, the Lake and District Fire Department, which is partly in Yarmouth and partly in my constituency. Yarmouth, which does assist on many of our calls on the 103. And Mr. Speaker, I got to say, on many occasions, Woods Harbour is there. And I do remember one time when all through Woods Harbour and Shag Harbour there was a big forest fire, and I remember getting the call that we had to stand in Barrington. We basically had to drive around it on the highway and stood there to take care of that community while that fire department was racing through some communities and probably went right behind the member for Shelburne's house, right across his backyard. And you know, but that's the way we all work together. Wherever that call may be, we go and we make sure that we help. And Mr. Speaker, you know, talking to the people that are there's some people that joined the same time that I did. A guy by the name of Mike Muse, just lives down the road from me, but he was in Illbrook, I was Pubnico at the time, but we're still in the service. But lives have moved on, we've got our children that are older, and we question whether we should be part of the fire department because of our competing priorities. Mr. Speaker, I got to say, last year, I remember being on the roof of a house with Mike's brother Curtis. We were putting out a chimney fire. And Mr. Speaker, I got to say, you know, having me on the roof is one thing, but having Curtis there is something else on that day, because I know I'm going to get some of the fat jokes there, but I mean, there you go. But Mr. Speaker, it was Curtis's wedding day. So here it was on Curtis's wedding day, putting on the gear, climbing to the top of that house. And I looked at him, and I sort of looked at him, and I said, "Aren't you getting married today?" He said, yeah, that's later on. I said, yeah, but, you know, you could hurt yourself. You could fall off the roof. There could be something else that happened. He said, "No, I'm a firefighter. This is what I do. My wife can wait." So I don't know how well that's worked out for him, but Mr. Speaker, I can say that I know he's still happily married, and knowing full well that he was a volunteer firefighter to start. Mr. Speaker, I got to say I was very heartened to hear the comments from the members of this House and be in agreement of this 15-year and 25-year recognition of that service. Because I know for members, again, like me, there's got to be maybe something else to sort of drag us along, because we know that the volunteer base continues to erode. You know, the new firefighters don't tend to readily come out. Our junior firefighter program doesn't seem to be as good as it used to be. So more and more, we as more experienced firefighters have to stay in the service and continue along. But Mr. Speaker, I think this has a lot of merit. Just like the tax rebate that we did, just like the license plate for firefighters that we did. So this is one more piece in recognizing people that put their community first every time. So Mr. Speaker, I think that we have a lot of agreement in this House for this bill, and I would ask for unanimous consent to move second reading and move this on to law amendments.
Thank you. The honourable member from Hammonds Plain, Upper Sackville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me a great honour to stand here today to speak to this bill. Also that I give great merits to anyone who is in the fire service here in the province, and it's certainly. I remember years ago when my stepdad had a heart attack. Who were the first people there, Mr. Speaker? The first people there were the firefighters to comfort my family, to comfort my stepfather, who was in the midst of having a heart attack. And Mr. Speaker, I also remember one day traveling back from a university class about 5 or 6 years ago, and in fact, I called 911 because, as we all know, as the member from Halifax Clayton Park will know, the crosswalk in front of Mount St. Vincent is a very dangerous intersection. And I had the unfortunate, I had to actually call 911, and again, it comes back to who were the first people on the scene, and those were the firefighters. And I give respect to anybody who's able to come to a blazing fire and put their life on the line to save other people. It's certainly a great thing. You know, Mr. Speaker, in my riding, I have four fire stations in Hammonds Plains, Upper Hammonds Plains, Lower Sackville, and Upper Sackville. And Mr. Speaker, I've over the course of being the MLA for the area for about 10 months now, almost 11 months, I've certainly contacted them, spoken with them, and again, do anything I can to help support their efforts in everything that they do in their community. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I do thank you for the time here, and again, for all those firefighters who put their lives on the line. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Order, please. The time allotted for debate on Bill number 28 has now expired. The Honourable, the House Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, now call Bill number 25, an act to amend Chapter 5 of the Acts 2005, the Emergency Services Health Act.
Bill number 25. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity now to rise on Bill number 25, an act to amend Chapter 5 of the Acts of 2005, the Emergency Health Services Act. Mr. Speaker, I want to start out by saying, first of all, I want to say that this bill provides that Nova Scotia long service medals for paramedics and other persons involved in the provision of emergency health services are to be given after 15 and 25 years of service. Mr. Speaker, what the House is going to see, has seen this afternoon and will see, and as a result of other bills that we've tabled in this House, Mr. Speaker, Bill number 21, the Income Tax Act, the Motor Vehicle Act, of course, Bill number 25, Bill number 28, and Bill number 30. Mr. Speaker, what we're attempting to do here is to align the medal awarding process in this province so it's consistent across emergency health services in Nova Scotia, whether it be for firefighters, whether it be for police, whether it be for paramedics. And Mr. Speaker, I have to start off by saying I'm kind of disappointed this afternoon that I thought we brought forward legislation. I think the honourable member opposite said earlier that when they were in opposition, they brought some good ideas forward, and I agree totally with that. They absolutely did. And we as a government, when we could, tried to move those issues forward. Lots of times, Mr. Speaker, members opposite in opposition will come forward with many requests that cost a lot of money, and the government has, at the end of the day, has to determine whether it can afford it or not. In this particular case, Mr. Speaker, what we're asking is firefighters, police officers, and paramedics, and other emergency responders in Nova Scotia be adequately recognized at 15 years of service with a medal, Mr. Speaker, that would have very, very little cost to the taxpayers and to this government. Now, Mr. Speaker, I heard members opposite and members this side of the House get up and speak about the bill that we discussed previous, 28. I will tell the House, Mr. Speaker, bill number 25, when we have a few moments left at the end of our debate, we'll be asking again for unanimous consent of this House to pass the legislation through second reading and on law amendments. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't put any requirement on the government other than to let a debate take place at law amendments. And the Speaker, if the government decides at the end of the day they never want to call a bill forward, that's their prerogative. It's out of our control once it passes out of here. But Mr. Speaker, we all can stand in the House and speak very highly of all these wonderful people that are in the ploy and the volunteer of this province. But Mr. Speaker, words are hollow. Actions speak. Actions would be to pass this on this and through second reading to law amendments and allow the process to follow. But you know, Mr. Speaker, very easy to stand up here and say, oh yes, we support our firefighters, we support our paramedics, we support our police. Mr. Speaker, then it ends here. Then it ends here, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, anyway, I'm going to talk, Mr. Speaker, for a few minutes about Bill 25 and go back to my policing days, Mr. Speaker, when the paramedics were really, at that time, they were called ambulance drivers. And Mr. Speaker, I have the greatest respect for the paramedics in place in this province today. You know, Mr. Speaker, I remember the days as a police officer when you'd attended at an accident and an ambulance would arrive at the scene. Lots of times, an ambulance driver all by themselves, alone. And the first thing they would do is ask for the closest person, whether it's a tow truck driver, whether it's a police officer, or whoever, to help them in their duty in regards to moving a victim of an accident or whatever the case may be. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, we've come a long way in this province, and credit to Dr. Stewart, I believe, with the Liberal government that brought in the quality of training and equipped paramedics that we've seen, I think, is second to none in North America. Mr. Speaker, maybe members of this House would know the name, maybe a lot wouldn't, but Dr. David Rippey was a general physician in Spring Hill, where he started his career right out of medical school, and in fact, stayed there for many years, I think probably around 20 years or more, until he went on to the District Health Authority, Regional Health Board, and then went on into the Department of Health here in Halifax, and assumed a very high-level professional career with the Department of Health. And Mr. Speaker, Dr. Rippey passed away a number of years ago, and I believe today Dr. Rippey's name, in fact, is on one of the ambulances over in Dartmouth, that they give him credit for the great work he did in the Department of Health. And I remember Dr. Rippey told me one day, I was at a little boy had been hurt, just a very, very minor injury. This young boy had been hurt, and Dr. Rippey came along, and I was working with the police force at the time, and he said to me that we were waiting for the ambulance to come, and he said, you know, we were just getting into then this new level of healthcare service with paramedics. And I remember Dr. Rippey saying to me at the time, he said, people in Nova Scotians will agree someday that they're far better off to have this highly trained, skilled professional paramedic arrive to take care of most emergency situations than they are with someone like myself, he said, himself as a physician. He said that, you know, the quality of training that paramedics in this province have, and I know the member opposite from Sackville-Cobequid is a trained paramedic. I know the honourable member sits behind me from Hants West is as well. And, you know, and Mr. Speaker, I think we'd all agree in the House that we owe a lot to individuals like these gentlemen here, and as well the many throughout the province that provide that very, very professional service to Nova Scotians. And I want to say that what Dr. Rippey said at the time, I agree with totally today, that we are definitely in a situation now where we have an excellent service that we can be very proud of. And Mr. Speaker, they deserve to be recognized. Yes, they're paid. Yes, many people attend emergency services, for example, firefighters that are volunteers and not paid. But you know, Mr. Speaker, these individuals, and I'm going to mention a couple that talked to me about the service medals, the exemplary service medal. One is Roger McCabe, who was stationed in Oxford, is now, I believe, stationed in Spring Hill. And another one who continually talks to me about paramedic service and about the ambulance service and about training and so on, and that's Keith Odlin of Parisborough. Now, both these are long-time service professional people who have been with the have been paramedics for a number of years, and they certainly are very strong proponents of the medal process. Now, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say again that you know, when you look at the training and the high-level service that these individuals provide, surely we can look at providing them with something as simple as a 15-year and a 25-year medal. Now, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, we in the previous government passed legislation that would allow medals to be provided to this group of individuals, paramedics. Unfortunately, we did not specify the years that they would receive them. So hence the bills before the House today. Mr. Speaker, you know, to the government it shouldn't matter whether it's 15, 25, or 10. The number shouldn't matter. But what we're proposing here today, Mr. Speaker, to show our support, show our respect for these very highly trained professionals, paramedics, firefighters, police. Surely the government can put aside the issue of the fact that it's brought forward by the opposition, the fact that it would be very little cost of any to the government, and allow this bill to pass forward from this House into law amendments, and then if the government decides from that date forward they don't wish to call it, that's the government's prerogative. That's the House Leader of the government party's prerogative. But Mr. Speaker, I can tell you this, firefighters in Nova Scotia will read what we all had to say here today, how we respect them. They'll read that. The paramedics are going to read, within very short order here, what we've had here to say in the House here today about them and what the government's decision on whether they would allow this bill to pass forward, to show them the recognition that we all say they deserve. Mr. Speaker, and pretty soon it'll be the police and, you know, Mr. Speaker, and then the other emergency response organizations. So, Mr. Speaker, words are easy to speak. Action is a little harder. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I heard the member's office speak very positively about these bills. So I would hope they'll be able to tell paramedics, they'll be able to tell firefighters, while they wouldn't allow this legislation to pass through into law amendments, to have a fuller debate in the back of the committee of the whole. Now, very easy, Mr. Speaker, they're sitting over there, you know, they get all kinds of reasons why. I like to have them stand publicly and tell these people why they don't think they don't deserve a medal at 15 years. It's that simple. It's that simple. If you believe they should, pass it on. If you don't think they should, I guess you'll stall it here. But I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, from this side of the House, I've spoken to my colleagues from the Liberal Party. They support this. All the members of our caucus, Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House support this. We believe in the firefighters, we believe in the paramedics, we believe in the police, and we're willing, Mr. Speaker, to put this bill forward to have a full debate at law amendments. And I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, that the government allow this, with the unanimous consent of the House, to pass through to law amendments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's extremely important for all members to stand in their place when you care deeply about an issue. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, I care deeply about the men and women who are on guard right now as we speak, Mr. Speaker, across this province to serve other fellow Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, and that's the paramedics of this province. Our caucus, our government, cares deeply about these individuals, Mr. Speaker, and I think it definitely shows in our actions as a government, Mr. Speaker, because since I came into this House, we all bring in our backgrounds, we bring in our education, we bring to this House our employment, past employment, Mr. Speaker, and as you are aware, Mr. Speaker, I was a paramedic in this province before I came into this historic chambers. And one of the reasons why I did make that decision to come here, Mr. Speaker, is to give paramedics a voice on the floor of this legislature, Mr. Speaker, and I think I've done a good job at doing that over the last 7 years, Mr. Speaker, and I'll give a few examples of what I've done and what our caucus has done over the last number of years, Mr. Speaker. One of the first things as a new MLA, Mr. Speaker, you're always go to the comfort areas of what you know and what you were educated in to try to bring change about, Mr. Speaker. And of course, in the paramedic profession, we've seen significant changes over the last decade or so, Mr. Speaker, and I've complimented former governments on decisions they've made to improve the service that people receive here in Nova Scotia and the service that men and women give to Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, as paramedics. One of the first pieces of legislation I introduced, started working on it, Mr. Speaker, it was in 2003. and that was a piece of legislation I believe I introduced it for the first time, because I had to introduce it a number of times, was in 2004. I think it was in the spring of 2004, and it was to allow for some protection, Mr. Speaker. And something that I've said many times was it was a bill to protect those who protect us, Mr. Speaker. And I said before, where I read that on the gas pump of a gas station in Florida, I thought that resonates. And that's what that piece of legislation was meant to do, was to ensure when you have medical personnel, you have firefighters or police on the side of a highway, Mr. Speaker, attending to an emergency, is that you slow down, you allow space for those individuals to have the opportunity to work in a safe environment, Mr. Speaker. And I got to tell you, it wasn't well received when I first introduced it. I remember the Minister of Transportation at the time, Ron Russell, wasn't too warm about slowing traffic down on the highways. He was a bit old school. No offense to Mr. Russell, but he was a great parliamentarian here, but he wasn't comfortable with doing that. So I continued to try to have dialogue with him. I try to have interactions with him to ensure that the government recognizes the importance of that piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker. So I continued forward, Mr. Speaker, introducing that legislation. And, you know, once my colleague, a former paramedic, the member from East Hants, joined, Hants West, sorry, joined this chamber in 2006, he did give me his verbal support for that piece of legislation. But unfortunately, he didn't get the support of his government of the time, Mr. Speaker. And I was very proud, Mr. Speaker, that the first piece of legislation that this NDP government brought forward was that bill, Mr. Speaker, to improve and protect those who protect us, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very proud of my government and our caucus for doing that, Mr. Speaker. So, as we all know, I know you're not allowed props, Mr. Speaker, but on everybody's desk today there's a postcard that indicates effective May 1st that law comes into effect, Mr. Speaker, and that shows what a government can do if they're serious about protecting those who protect us, Mr. Speaker. So to hear the member from Colchester North or Colchester South stand up, Cumberland South, Cumberland South. I'm a little bit, yeah, Cumberland South. Say that you know, actions speak louder than words. I think we've proved them, Mr. Speaker. That is true, because we have acted to ensure that those individuals in our province who are on call every day of the year, Mr. Speaker, get the support of government. We do have a medal that paramedics received today, Mr. Speaker. I was at a ceremony in September, I believe it was September 4th of this year, and I think almost a dozen paramedics received a medal called the Emergency Medical Service Exemplary Service Medal, and that was presented by the Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Speaker, in the Red Room. It was a great ceremony. Many paramedics that I've worked with over the years were recognized for the dedicated service they did, Mr. Speaker. The Exemplary Service Medal recognizes people in high-risk professions, as I stated in the earlier debate on another piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, who have dedicated themselves to preserving public safety in Canada through long and outstanding services, Mr. Speaker. The Emergency Medical Service Medal is one of the newest medals in the Exemplary Service Medal family, Mr. Speaker, joining other public safety professions, including police officers, correction services, fire services, Canadian Coast Guards, and peace officers, Mr. Speaker. This medal of exemplary was created in 1994 through a branch of the Office of the Secretary of the Governor-General in Canada, Mr. Speaker, and I'm proud to have the opportunity to see paramedics here in Nova Scotia receive that medal. And I think it shows that the province here recognizes the service of these individuals, Mr. Speaker. We have paramedics who are working all 7 days a week, Mr. Speaker, 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. When many of us are sitting home on those holidays with our family, Mr. Speaker, there are men and women who are out there away from their family, ready to respond to emergencies, ready to lend service to those who are in need, who have a medical emergency, Mr. Speaker, in all parts of this province. From someone who might fall off the cliffs in Meat Cove, Mr. Speaker, to the wharfs down in Shelburne, there are men and women who are ready who are dedicated, professional, and have a high degree of medical training, Mr. Speaker, because as we've said many times in this House, we have one of the best, if not the best, service, our paramedic service, ambulance service in North America, Mr. Speaker, and it's been recognized as such a service, Mr. Speaker. We've seen so many transitions throughout the year, Mr. Speaker, so many transitions that have improved the delivery of health care to individuals in our province, Mr. Speaker, and especially in rural Nova Scotia. Those are the individuals who will benefit more from the professionalism, from the training that paramedics have today, Mr. Speaker, because ultimately what's happening in small rural communities, when you have an emergency, Mr. Speaker, is you have an emergency room going to that patient. The sheer number of medications that are on an ambulance today, Mr. Speaker, is amazing. Same as what you would find in an emergency department. The equipment we have, Mr. Speaker, same as what you would find in the emergency room, Mr. Speaker. Talk about defibrillators, suctions, other mechanical devices, Mr. Speaker, that are on our trucks, ready to put into service, Mr. Speaker. And they're all being used by highly skilled professionals, Mr. Speaker. Paramedics in this province love to learn. They want to learn new techniques. They want to administer new drugs. They want to ensure that the patients that they serve seek the best medical help that they can. And Mr. Speaker, I think as a government, we're continuing to support that, and we'll continue to support that in the future, Mr. Speaker. And it's important that we take the time to recognize these individuals, Mr. Speaker, because they see a lot of stuff. Mr. Speaker, I've seen a lot of stuff over the years, Mr. Speaker, and some of it's not nice. A lot of people don't like to talk about it. People deal with it in different ways, Mr. Speaker, but we see a lot of death and dying that most people wouldn't want to see, wouldn't want to come across in a lifetime. And we have men and women that come across it every day. Every shift they work, Mr. Speaker, they never know what they're going to come across, what they're going to see, and what they're going to find themselves in what situation, Mr. Speaker. And if we could continue to ensure that they do that in the most safe environment, then we're going to continue to do that, Mr. Speaker, just like the Bill 1 that was passed in the last session, Mr. Speaker. We'll continue to do that as a government, and I know that I have the support of my caucus. I know I have the support of the Minister of Health, and I know I have the support of this government, Mr. Speaker, to do that. So as I said earlier, we do have an opportunity to recognize paramedics through the Emergency Medical Service Exemplary Service Medal, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell you that my government will review with the Lieutenant Governor this issue and consider whether this is the most appropriate way to recognize the paramedics that provide service in our province here today, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now recognize the honourable member for Halifax-Clayton Park.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to join the debate today as we debate Bill 25, which is an opposition bill calling for, it's called the Emergency Health Services Act, and as we know from the debate, we're calling for a revision to the Act, which would allow for medals to be given out to those paramedics and emergency health services staff who have served 15 and 25 years. And Mr. Speaker, I was glad to hear the previous speaker from Sackville speaking about the member for Sackville. Cobequid, is that right? Thank you very much. To get the correct title, we're all having a little trouble with our geography today, but thank you, Sackville Cobequid. And he is a paramedic, Mr. Speaker, and at the end of his speech today, or his debate contribution, he did say that he would look at this and take it back to his caucus and see if there is not a compelling reason to do this. And I would like to join the debate and urge him to do so, because I do see that this is something that was an omission in the original Act, that there is a provision for it in the original Act that we are amending here. It in fact talks about medals, long service medals, or giving medals to our emergency responders, but it didn't say when. And so what this does is simply set a framework out, and I was pleased to hear the member from Cumberland South speaking about it. Initially, I wasn't sure where the idea had come from, but his suggestion that this would help align all of our various emergency responders to have the same system in place for medals for long service. And I think that that's very commendable. And just to talk about our own public service, you know, where we as MLAs frequently are in contact with people who provide services in community service or in the Department of Environment, Health, Education, and so on, they routinely receive awards for long service. There's a big event once a year. Many of the members have attended that event. The Premier will go and have his photo taken with these many individuals who have given long service and good service to the province of Nova Scotia. And why would we not afford the same recognition and respect to our members that serve as paramedics and emergency health responders? So I think there is a very good reason to do so, and I'm sure that the members of the government will agree. And I think, you know, perhaps they want to do it in their own time, have a chance to look at it, and not do it at the urging of the opposition. That may be their problem with this, but I must say it has merit. And we on the opposition side have often said if we hear of something good the government does, we like to acknowledge it. I think on the government side, when you see members of the opposition recognizing an omission or something that needs to be corrected, that is in fact a small item, let's be honest, not a costly item, not an item that's going to be difficult for government to institute. It really is something that shows respect and recognizes the contribution and the hard work and the dangerous work that these people, these very important paramedics serve in our province. So I think that there's every reason to look at it, and I hope that that sort of good judgment will prevail rather than politics in this instance. The member from Sackville-Cobequid actually said as well that there are other means of recognizing paramedics, and it is true that there is a national program to do so. As he mentioned, I had looked it up online to get a little bit of information on it, but it's called the Emergency Medical Services Exemplary Service Medal. But in a single year, only 14 of our paramedics were able to be given that medal. Now, I'm not taking anything away from a national award that would particularly look for, you know, somebody who'd done something really outstanding in their field, or maybe done something particularly heroic, which I know paramedics do every day. But to find those people we want to give this national honor to is still, you know, very, very commendable and still has its place. But what I'm saying is, what is wrong with recognizing the long service of all of the paramedics in the province? You know, as they provide that service every day, and as the member said, we don't know what kind of stress they're under day to day, because, you know, just as we said in the earlier debate around fire service, when the call comes in and you're heading out to a traffic accident or the scene of some accident or crime or disaster, you don't know what you're going to be faced with, and you have to be ready to provide service and help and step in, and when really at people's darkest hour for an individual. You know, if it's somebody that in our family or in our community, somebody that we care for that's in distress, we rest easy knowing that we can call and there will be an emergency responder come, and that we have paramedics that are the best trained in the country, and in fact the best service in the country. Mr. Speaker, I would be remiss if I did not mention as well the contribution of John Savage and his government in setting up this stellar service that we have here in our province. When I arrived in Nova Scotia, when I returned after being away for a number of years, and I had a young family, this would be 20 years ago, I was really shocked to discover that a lot of our ambulance services were actually coming from funeral homes. The ambulance was parked at the funeral home, and they provided the service in much of the province. And they didn't have the training in any way that we have today. You know, and I mean, God love them, they were doing the best they could, but it was a ragtag service that we provided in this province. And John Savage was a doctor. He recognized the importance importance of getting the right kind of care to people right away and saving lives. And his Minister of Health was Dr. Ron Stewart, who took this up as his cause. And, you know, for whatever, you know, I don't actually think too many feathers were ruffled in doing this, but, you know, whenever you make change, sometimes people don't like it. But this is a change that we should all be proud of as Nova Scotians, and I'm particularly proud of as a Liberal, because I say after his government was no longer in power, we can look back and say there's something that is so much better than it ever was before, something that left a legacy for all of us. And as I say, I think we should all be proud of that and continue to thank them for it. And we have a very proud service of men and women who serve as paramedics in this province. And again, people have come here from around the world, from across Canada, and other places in North America, and in fact around the world, to see how we have set up a system to serve the people of Nova Scotia in every remote corner and in every part of our cities as well. And we have a great system in place. And in fact, the recent report by Dr. John Ross that came out spoke about, in fact, Dr. Ross is looking at our emergency rooms and our emergency coverage, and he actually spoke about the fantastic service we have serving rural Nova Scotia and areas that might otherwise be suffering some closures of at least losing hours. They're closed at times in some of the rural areas. And I think he was putting that in there to be reassuring, to say even when your emergency room is closed, rest assured that there is an excellent emergency health service in this province, and that you have got coverage and you have wonderful paramedics who will be coming to your door if you need them. So I think that we need to remember that, and again, you know, the point of our discussion today is to say those people go above and beyond every day when they come into work and don't know what sort of scene that they will be required to visit and what kind of work that they may have to respond to, and they save lives every day, Mr. Speaker. And I think that's why the bill is before us, is to say, how can you not recognize that, you know, in a regular program where we say long service needs to be recognized. You've put in those hours and days, you know, countless years, and we want to recognize that what you're doing is helping our province and making our public safer and providing peace of mind as well, saving lives and every day giving Nova Scotians peace of mind. So I can't see that you could ever have enough ways to say thank you. I feel the same way with volunteers. If we have a provincial-wide volunteer program to recognize people, that's great. And HRM has their own system to recognize people. But in my own community, we said, you know, that's wonderful, but we want to have our own volunteer recognition as well, which some might say, well, that's 3 tiers of recognition. But people cannot be thanked enough for the work they do in our communities. And there are so many people that should be thanked that, you know, I can't see any reason to take away from any one of those ceremonies. And although HRM didn't particularly want to support a little community like ours in mainland North Halifax having their own awards, and I know Bedford as well has just had their individual volunteer awards, we need to do that, because we need to do that at every level and in every community. And by the same token, I would say, great, there are some national awards for paramedics, and I'm delighted that we had 14 Nova Scotians receive that award. But at the same time, we need to recognize our men and women who serve in this province day in and day out, and do it on a regular basis that does dovetail and coincide with our other emergency responders like fire and police. And Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure, do I have just a few minutes, a minute? I have
40 seconds. 40
seconds left. Well, I will say that I think it's extremely important that we do this, that when you dial 911 in this province, you can be assured that, as I say, a top-notch, best-trained paramedic will be at your door, and that means the world to people here in this province, and we need to give them the recognition and support and thanks that they well deserve. So I believe this bill should be passed, and I hope that it will come back to the floor of the legislature at another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it gives me great pleasure to stand in my place today to talk about Bill number 25, an Act to amend Chapter 5 of the Acts of 2005, the Emergency Health Service Act. And I'm proud that it was one of our own colleagues that brought this bill forward, the member from Hants West, who served as a paramedic. And you know, it is interesting, Mr. Speaker, when you look around and you see the diversity of the people that represent people in this House, and we actually have 2 people who have served as paramedics who are here in this House,
extending their service to the people of Nova Scotia. And I think both of them should be congratulated on the work that they did in their past lives and on the work they're doing today. Now, Mr. Speaker, healthcare workers, in my mind, are a very special breed of people. It doesn't matter to them what the ailment is. They want to help people. And when you think about it, they're working with people that are not always at their best. They're working with people that have some kind of trauma in their life, some problem that they need to have help with. And yet the paramedics don't think about that. They just get on their truck and they move on to the scene where there is a problem, and they try to make sure that they can help someone. And Mr. Speaker, when you think about it, it's not a job for these people, it's a profession. And it's a profession that they take a lot of pride in. There's a lot of training, there's a lot of work that goes in to do this. One of my colleagues has said it's really not even a profession, it's a calling. Because you need to be a very special person, as I said earlier. There is immense special equipment that must be used by the people who are paramedics, and there's different types of medications. If you can think of where we started as a province with emergency health services and with paramedics, and where we are today. And my colleague from the Halifax Clayton Park had mentioned that it was Dr. Ron Stewart who helped bring this forward, and I'm very pleased to say that he's another one of those people that came from Cape Breton and who was a leader in his time, Mr. Speaker. He was a leader in his time, and he deserves the respect of this House for bringing that forward. He was the person that brought this to California, and he turned around and he brought it back home to Nova Scotia. And I think, again, we as a province should be proud of the leadership that we have showed. And of course, we should always be proud that it was a Cape Breton that showed the leadership. Yes, yes, sir. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the conditions that the paramedics work under are not always the best of conditions. You think about it. These people are called out, and they really never know what is going to be in front of them. It could be an accident. It could be a construction site. It could be a problem in a home, and they're not sure what that problem is. They could get a call from a family member. They could get a call from a police officer. They could get a call from a person on the street that's going by somewhere. They never hesitate. They hop in their vehicle, they get their gear together, and off they go. And where do they go? They go to make sure that they can help someone. They are taking a chance, but it's not about them. It's about the people that the paramedics can help. They never put into consideration what might happen to them. They're worried about the person that the call came in about. And there's many things that could face them. You could get into an accident site where you don't know what kind of gases or fuels or environmental issues might be there. You could get into a place where there's a spill, where you have to work on an individual that's covered in some kind of a material that you don't even know what it is. But yet, the paramedic is willing to take the time to help that person because that's what they're about. And you have to give them a lot of credit because they don't always think about themselves. They think about the person that they were called to help. And we should be more than proud to stand in this House and congratulate them and identify them and support them with this bill, a bill that identifies what these people have done over the course of years. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm a little older than some in this House, and in our day, and then certainly in my parents' day, a person took on a profession and they were in it usually for their lifetime. They were either a fisherman or farmer or a fireman or a police officer, but it was a lifetime profession. Today, we see many people who have 4 and 5 different careers over the spell of their working time. And for someone who would stay in a profession such as this, a profession that needs their all, that needs everything, if they would stay in that, the least that we as a province can do is recognize them for 15 years of service or for 25 years of service or whatever the number is. Because it is the type of job, the type of calling that has a lot of strain on an individual, that creates a lot of turmoil within oneself. So I think when we're talking about putting paramedics and putting this bill through, and listening to my colleague from Sackville-Cobequid who says that he believes this is a good thing, then I think we should all stand together and move this bill forward. Mr. Speaker, you know, the people who are paramedics, they don't ask for recognition. They don't do this because they want to be recognized. They do it because it's the right thing for them to do. It is something, as I said earlier, is their calling. And Mr. Speaker, when you think about that, when you think about what a person will put themselves through to help someone else, it's really a trait of Nova Scotians. Nova Scotians are known worldwide for being there, helping individuals, helping people who are neighbors, helping complete strangers. And that's what a paramedic does. A paramedic will go out not knowing where they're going, not knowing what's before them, but knowing they have an opportunity to help an individual that may have some serious issues and problems. There are a number of people who are paramedics, and they're also proud of what they do. And they put a lot of energy and time in it. And most of them, when they're finished their regular job, they turn around and they're volunteers in the communities. There are firefighters. They are firefighters. They are people who work with disadvantaged individuals in their community. They're in all walks of life. So here we are today as a group of individuals who have the honor to represent Nova Scotians in this House, with an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to recognize healthcare, paramedics, first responders, police officers, and firefighters. All of these people, Mr. Speaker, all of these people make our communities better to live in, safer to live in, and places we can be proud to live in. You know, Mr. Speaker, as has been said by many, when people are rushing away from a bad thing, paramedics are rushing in to that bad thing. They're the ones that are not worried about themselves. They're worried about whoever has had the mishap. And you know, Mr. Speaker, when you talk about doing something with this bill, you talk about trying to move it forward to make sure that the right recognition is given to individuals. Well, there was an individual that used to sit in this House, and one of his favorite sayings was, "It's never the wrong time to do the right thing." And Mr. Speaker, moving this bill forward is the right thing. It is the thing that we should be doing as a group. We shouldn't be standing back, and we shouldn't be standing back trying to figure out who's going to get credit for it. Yeah. We should be making sure that the paramedics of this province, the firefighters, the police officers, and all of those individuals that could be recognized under this bill would have an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, would have an opportunity to be recognized, because those are the people that need to be recognized. It's not us that needs the credit for getting it, none of us in this House. It's the individuals that we need. Mr. Speaker, I would like to move the second reading of this motion, ask for unanimous consent so it can be moved on to law amendments so that the people of Nova Scotia can rightly give credit to our paramedics.
The honourable member for Colchester must. The honourable member for Guysborough Sheet Harbour. Order, please. Order. The honourable member for Guysborough Sheet Harbour has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to get up this evening and to talk about Bill 25. And I certainly would agree with my colleagues in the House that you know, the individuals that we talked about here this evening, the firefighters.
Order, please. The time allotted for Bill 25 has elapsed. I will now recognize the Honourable House Leader for the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that concludes opposition members' business for the day.
Thank you. I will now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the hours of the House tomorrow will be from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. and after the daily routine, we will be doing supply, and after that, I don't think we'll do any bills tomorrow, Mr. Speaker. We'll just go 11 to 6, and we'll do, after daily routine and question period, we'll do supply. I wish you to now rise to, again, to meet at the hours tomorrow from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m.
The motion for adjournment has been made. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. The House stands adjourned and will rise tomorrow at 11 a.m. until 6 p.m. We have now arrived at the moment of interruption. The adjournment to debate has been chosen as announced earlier and won by the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville, who will debate. Therefore, be it resolved, the House of Assembly recognize that this government has kept its promise to maximize federal funds to build the infrastructures that communities need, like the interchange on 101 and Margison Drive. Margison Drive. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And just for clarification, it's Margison Drive. And it certainly gives us an honour for me today to stand and speak on behalf of our government regarding promises kept to maximize federal funds to build the much-needed infrastructure that communities need, like the interchange on Highway 101 at Margison Drive. Now, Mr. Speaker, Margison Drive is a very important new road that's being constructed in the riding of Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville because it has been a project that's been on the books since the early 90s. And at that time, I'm pretty sure it was called the Department of Highways, but I'm not quite sure. But back then, of whatever form it was discussed to have a regional highway that would connect the communities of Beaverbank, of Middle Sackville, and then of eventually to Tantallon. But obviously, with fiscal restraints back in that time, it was felt that it could not happen. So, Mr. Speaker, it became evident that because of the federal stimulus package, that this project go forward. And after much review, the province had announced that a commitment of a section of the interchange and a connector road connecting Margison Drive, which is a well-connected family in the community of Sackville, and as well to Trunk 1, which is known as Sackville Drive, in 2008. And of course, it was conditional only on joint funding from all three levels of government. So the total cost of this interchange project is estimated to be around about $5 million, and its cost shared between the federal